Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Does anybody remember what was the topic that we dealt with last time? I had come here on the first or the second day, I think.
Sir, SWOT analysis,
You
strength,
remember.
weakness,
English.
opportunities,
Thank you,
talent.
English. Thank you. Thank you. Happy to know that you remember it and then you remember me. And before I begin, I think I told you last time I would like to have all of you with your cameras on if you do not have any problem there. And if bandwidth is not a problem and if you are presentable in your attire now, please switch on your cameras and then it becomes easier for me to make some parts of my presentation. And the second thing is you can please feel free to raise your hand or stop me, ask me a question anytime you feel like. If this class has to become interactive, perhaps you are more responsible for making it that way rather than I. I will make, of course, an effort, a conscious effort of trying to make it interactive. But if you also get involved, if you also, feel free to ask me questions and give suggestions and interrupt me at any point of time. I love it that way. Okay, let me begin by sharing my slideshow and then we will begin our presentation. So today I think you know what the topic is that we are going to discuss. It is multiple learning styles. This is the title that the university has given me, but I slightly changed it to make it a little longer. I added pedagogic strategies because it's not just knowing the learning styles that's important. We must know what to do with our knowledge. So in case we know that there are different learning styles and what they are, and if we can identify those learning styles, we must also have a strategy to handle that. Isn't that? Do you agree with me? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes,
Good,
sir.
good. So that's why I added that pedagogic strategies for managing, handling, right? The various multiple learning styles. Okay, I'm presenting my talk today or my session today in 4 different components, parts. First, we will discuss what are these learning styles. Most likely, you already know them. That's why I'll not spend much time on them. And maybe I'll spend a few minutes, not very long, on how do they arise, why people learn differently, why students are different from this learning aspect, and what leads to such differences. Then we will see a historical perspective, and also I'll try to deal with each one of these learning styles in detail. And simultaneously, while I'm doing part 3, and also after part 3 is over, we will have some pedagogic implications. So how teachers can intervene and how teachers can impact, how teachers can handle, manage these different learning styles to make their teaching more effective and learning happen. So this is the structure of my presentation for my today's session. I have about 80 minutes from now, so we'll try to do as much as possible. I have 3 short video clips also, and I will maybe play them for a certain purpose. Okay. So I will just begin by asking you very simple questions. You can go to the chat box and then you can just write the first letter of your answer. You did not write the whole answer. That will take time. Just the first letter. Do you prefer reading or listening? If you prefer reading, write R. If you prefer listening, write L. Do you prefer R or L? That means when you become a learner, not as a teacher, suppose you are learning something, you want to read or you want to listen. Which is better for you? And the second question is, do you prefer to watch a picture or read a description? So if you prefer watching pictures, write W. And if you prefer reading a description, usually a picture always has a description below, right? Or do you read that and then enjoy reading that? If you prefer watching pictures, write W. And if you prefer reading, write R. And the third question, do you prefer studying on your own, lonely, solitary, you always try to do something on, not something, I mean, reading, learning on your own, or do you prefer to study in the company of others, in groups? We call it combined study here. I don't know what you call it in your place. In Telangana, we call it combined study. So people form a group and then some of them come together and then they study together. Which do you like? If you prefer independent study, write I. And if you prefer combined study, write C. Okay, let me just stop this for a moment and come back out of this, and then let me just go to 1 second. Yes. So what have you written in the chat box? Oh, many of you have again many different answers. I see almost all possible combinations here. Okay, let me go back to my screen. So what do you understand from that? I think I did not read the items in the chat box, but what I found is that there are all kinds of combinations, permutations, possibilities. So some of you have written RWI, some of you have written RRC, some of you have written LWC, LW, all possibilities. And some of you perhaps could not write because maybe you felt that you both read and listen, you both enjoy both. So I did not give you an option for that. Or maybe there is somebody who neither enjoys reading nor listening. So I asked you to write RL. That's why I limited the scope for the possible answers, but there are many others also. So what I understand from your answers is that we all are different in our preferences. Everyone prefers learning a different way. I may be a reader more than a listener, but at the same time, I may love reading and learning independently. So different possible combinations are there. That's what this simple exercise has already proved. Right. The questions, I'm going to show you my first video clip. I'm beginning by giving you 3 questions. This is slightly a long video. Usually I don't use video clips longer than 1.5 to 2 minutes during my presentations, but this one is about 6 minutes, and I could not, avoid this though it's a little longer. I think it serves a very important purpose, and that's why I've chosen this. But don't just watch it. After you have watched the video, you have to answer these 3 questions for me. Maybe you can make a mental note of them, or if you want, you can take a screenshot of them. But we are going to discuss these 3 questions after the video. My question number 1 is, do all students learn the same way? This you have already proved. You said that you learn different ways. Maybe students in other places in other ways also are alike. They learn differently. Maybe if it's a yes/no question, maybe already your answer is ready, yes, but maybe you can be a little more elaborate. Then the second question is, what do these differences depend on? So if students learn differently, why? Where does that difference come from? Where does that originate? Where does that begin? Okay, so the source of that difference. Some of you, already have a vague idea of how these differences occur, but listen to the video and get answers from there. And the third question that I would like you to answer after watching the video is, how does knowing these differences impact the classroom teaching learning process? Whatever happens in the classroom, does it get affected? Because there are various kinds of learners, does it impact our classroom performance as a teacher? And does it affect the process of learning on the part of the students? So if you're all ready for the video, just say yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful. It's a
Yes,
lovely.
sir.
You must carefully listen to this.
Yes, sir.
Wonderful, wonderful. So be ready for the video. I'm starting the video now.
Albert Einstein once said,
Sir, we can't see the video.
We can't see the video, sir.
Oh, sorry. How is that? Maybe I have to go to that.
No, now it looks.
Sorry. 1 second. Say it again. I shared window. Instead of sharing a window, do I have to share something else? A tab?
Full screen is better, sir. Entire
Yeah, full screen is okay. Full screen is all right. I was in full screen, but there are three options here. One is the entire screen, and one is a video, one is a tab.
entire screen is better.
Entire screen.
Entire screen is taking me to a Google screen. 1 second, I'll try it this way. Okay. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Albert Einstein once said, everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today on trial we have modern day schooling. Glad you could come. Not only does he make fish climb trees, but also makes them climb down and do a 10-mile run. Tell me, school, are you proud of the things you've done? Turning millions of people into robots. Do you find that fun? Do you realize how many kids relate to that fish swimming upstream in class, never finding their gifts, thinking they are stupid, believing they are useless? Well, the time has come. No more excuses. I call school to the stand and accuse him of killing creativity, individuality, and being intellectually abusive. He's an ancient institution that has outlived his usage. So, Your Honor, this concludes my opening statement, and if I may present the evidence of my case, I will prove it. Proceed. Exhibit A. Here's a modern-day phone. Recognize it? Here's a phone from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Stay with me. Here's a car from today, and here's a car from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Well, get this. Here's a classroom of today, and here's a class we used 150 years ago. Now, ain't that a shame? In literally more than a century, nothing has changed. Yet you claim to prepare students for the future? But with evidence like that, I must ask, do you prepare students for the future or the past? I did a background check on you and let the record show that you were made to train people to work in factories, which explains why you put students in straight rows, nice and neat, tell them sit still, raise your hand if you want to speak, give them a short break to eat, and for 8 hours a day, tell them what to think. Oh, and make them compete to get an A. A letter which determines product quality, hence grade A. I get it. At then, times were different. We all have a past. I myself am no Gandhi. But today, we don't need to make robot zombies. The world has progressed. And now we need people who think creatively, innovatively, critically, independently, with the ability to connect. See, every scientist will tell you that no two brains are the same. And every parent with 2 or more children will confirm that claim. So please explain why you treat students like cookie cutter frames or snapback hats, giving them this one-size-fits-all crap. What's your language? Sorry, Your Honor, but if a doctor prescribed the exact same medicine to all of his patients, the results would be tragic. So many people would get sick, yet when it comes to school, this is exactly what happens, this educational malpractice, where one teacher stands in front of 20 kids, each one having different strengths, different needs, different gifts, different dreams, and you teach the same thing the same way? That's horrific. Ladies and gentlemen, the defendant should not be acquitted. This may be one of the worst criminal offenses ever to be committed. And let's mention the way you treat your employees. Objection overruled. I want to hear this. It's a shame. I mean, teachers have the most important job on the planet, yet they're underpaid. No wonder so many students are short-changed. Let's be honest, teachers earn just as much as doctors because a doctor can do heart surgery and save the life of a kid, but a great teacher can reach the heart of that kid and allow him to truly live. See, teachers are heroes that often get blamed, but they're not the problem. They work in a system without many options or rights. Curriculum are created by policymakers, most of which have never taught a day in their life. Just obsessed with standardized tests. They think bubbling in a multiple choice question will determine success. That's outlandish. In fact, these tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned, but don't take my word for it. Take Frederick J. Kelly, the man who invented standardized testing, who said, and I quote, "These tests are too cruel to be used and should be abandoned." Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if we continue down this road, the results will be lethal. I don't have much faith in school, but but I do have faith in people. And if we can customize healthcare, cars, and Facebook pages, then it is our duty to do the same for education, to upgrade and change and do away with school spirit, because that's useless unless we're working to bring the spirit out of each and every student. That should be our task. No more common core. Instead, let's reach the core of every heart in every class. Sure, math is important, but no more than art or dance. Let's give every gifted people a chance. I know this sounds like a dream, but countries like Finland are doing impressive things. They have shorter school days, teachers make a decent wage, homework is non-existent, and they focus on collaboration instead of competition. But here's the kicker, boys and girls. Their educational system outperforms every other country in the world. Other places like Singapore are succeeding rapidly. Schools like Montessori, programs like Khan Academy, there is no single solution. But let's get moving, because while students may be 20% of our population, they are 100% of our future. So let's attend to their dreams. There's no telling what we can achieve. This is a world in which I believe, a world where fish are no longer forced to climb trees. I'll rest my case.
Okay, that was a very powerful presentation, a talk supported by lots of statistical detail and facts. I'll go back to the questions that I started with. So these are the three questions that I asked you. The next one. These are the three questions that I asked you. Do all students learn the same way? Any one of you can switch on your microphone and respond to that. It's not a yes/no question, though it looks like a yes/no question. Instead of saying yes or no, just give some substantial evidence.
No, sir.
Why?
So every person has different style of learning. Some learns by doing some activities, some learn theoretically, some learns by seeing some other persons doing.
Just a moment. So I'm sorry for interrupting you. Instead of giving your personal experiences, can you tell me something from the video that tells you that students learn differently? Has the video said anything about that?
So the first when the video starts, he put on the stage the fish, and he started with the saying that we expect that the fish should climb the tree.
Yeah.
And the fish has its own
limitations.
Yeah, its own characteristics and lifestyle, and she works accordingly.
Right.
So this is the first example that he gave for the learning of.
So the fish is an example of an animal, and here the example of a student. So like there are different kinds of animals. Some can climb up trees, some can swim, and some can walk on the land. Similarly, our students are different capabilities, and students learn differently. Students do things differently. So that's the focus of that video and that very powerful argument. Will somebody else tell me what do these differences depend on? I think the video again answers that question. Where do these differences come from? Anyone?
Sir, some are inborn.
Some are inborn, okay. Genetic perhaps, hereditary, we call them hereditary.
Yes.
And any other factors?
Environmental effect, personal choice.
Does the video say that? Yes, it does. It does. I don't know how many of you very carefully heard that. Yes, the video says that environment plays a role, the classroom plays a role, and many other factors were listed there. Okay. So all these factors together, right, contribute to, different learning styles. Okay. And the last question, how does knowing these differences impact the teaching learning process? The last 2 or 3 sentences in that video answer this question. He began by saying that 20% of our students are 100% of our future, and that's why. Anyone would like to answer that question? how does knowing these differences impact our classroom teaching learning process? How we teach and how our students
So we
learn.
can set the level of a teaching to
Oh,
the,
good, good. Thank you very
we
much.
can take the most unattentive, the weakest student as a starting point.
Right, right.
We
So
can set
maybe
our
making the
teaching.
inattentive students attentive, making the weak students strong, making the various kinds of students get involved in the class, all these things can be impacted by what we learn. So these are some of the answers you can gather from the video. The video says that all students learn different ways, they absorb differently, they process the information differently, they comprehend differently, they retain that information in their minds differently, they recall that information differently. So every student is different in every way. Then these differences depend on their cognitive abilities, their biological, that's a hereditary, biological, inborn abilities, their cognitive, psychological process that happen, and social factors, emotional factors, environmental factors, and there are so many other things that contribute to these differences. And our classroom process is certainly impacted in many different ways because of this knowledge that we can gain by knowing our students more in greater detail. Okay, let's begin by asking ourselves, why do we teach? Anybody? I have given you some clues there. I think you already know that acronym there, KSA, that you see on the screen. Why do we teach in the class at whatever level, school, college, university, wherever? K stands for
Knowledge,
knowledge, S stands for
skills,
skills, and A stands for
attitude.
attitude. So if you look at the three of those words in the reverse order, it's very easy to remember. ASK, ask. So we teach to ask, right? So to achieve these three things, so we want to change the student's attitude. Of course, that's a higher level expectation, but basically we are expected to teach knowledge and build skills. Unfortunately, I've read in many books. In my personal experience, I taught at the university and college levels for 36 years before I retired some 12 years ago from government service. But during those years, what my personal experience tells me is that in India, at least, I mean, I'm not talking about exceptions, in general, I'm not unkind to our country, but generally we stop with knowledge. So teachers generally think that transferring knowledge transfer is their job. So what is there in the book? It must go into the minds of the students. Maybe that's a very tall order already, but we don't go to the next level. Skills, we think that somebody else must do, the employer must do, some other outside agency must do, or some other government wing must do. So it's not the teacher's job. The teacher teaches and imparts knowledge. And attitude building, of course, many of us think that it's only, I mean, it's none of our job. Maybe if it's the job of a teacher, it's the language teacher's job. I'm a physics teacher. What have I got to do with attitude? I teach biology. What has attitude got to do with biology? So this is general attitude. Maybe it's not a mistake with us. It's a mistake with the system. We have been brought up like that. We have been taught like that. And we continue teaching like that. Maybe things are gradually changing. I mean, in the last few decades, we are gradually looking at the larger perspective and we are reorienting ourselves to build things, because in other countries, what happens? So skills and attitude are as important or sometimes even more important than knowledge, especially if you look at a country like Germany, France, most European countries. I think it's a skill building right from the primary level. They, I think, put a lot of focus on skills. Without going into that much, so these are the basic objectives. Apart from these, I left 3 blanks here. Maybe there can be many other objectives why we teach. So at each level, depending on the level at which we teach, depending on the kind of students that we teach, maybe some of us are working, for instance, with disabled children, physically, mentally disabled children. Some of us are dealing with students of a very high, brilliant, academic, intellectual level. So, I mean, depending on various factors, the objectives may differ, right? But irrespective of that, a teacher must take a few things into account. Some factors that affect learning, affect what happens in the classroom. If we have an idea of these things, I think it becomes easier for us to handle our classes. There are these 3 factors I would like to talk about. One is, we have already seen that students learn differently, and naturally their learning preferences are different. Like you said, you prefer to read, some prefer to write, some prefer to read, sit alone and study, and some prefer to do it in groups like that. We have seen the first slide. So learning preferences are there, and we have to have a strategy to handle them. But let me warn you here that the teacher has very limited control over manipulating the learning process of the students. He can only meet their needs to the possible extent. I mean, it's not 100% possible because there is a variety of students in any class. So learning preferences cannot be manipulated. You cannot change a certain kind of a learner to another kind easily, and it's not warranted also. There is a second factor, institutional environment. Again, the teacher is not responsible for that. It's the state government, the central government, your management, your principal, your vice chancellor. There are lots of other levels. Sometimes in private management, the management, the investing person, right? They are all responsible for the institutional environment that's built. But fortunately and unfortunately, the institutional environment also affects learning. To put it very simply, the kind of furniture that you have in your classroom, what kind of board you use, where is that board, where is that window, right? How are the students seated, comfortably or not? All these, they look very simple, but all these factors affect learning. And again, unfortunately, as teachers, we have very limited control over teaching this. Sometimes no control at all. I cannot do anything with that. Whatever is given to me, I have to manage within that. I am given a certain room, a certain furniture, a certain set of students, right? A certain environment. That's all I can work with. I cannot alter that. Zero. Maybe sometimes I can push a chair here and then turn a table that side, etc. That also is not a part of this actually. So institutional environment. Then the materials. The textbook that I teach, for instance, somebody else sitting at some other level decides what textbook do I have to teach. We think of autonomy and all that, but in real terms, autonomy is not happening in India yet. In most colleges where I have gone, I mean, not one or two of them, hundreds of them. So autonomy is a very, very superficially taken concept still. Many colleges where they call themselves autonomous, they just borrow a textbook, borrow a certain material which is already available, which is already used by some university, and they just change the cover page, or they just change the name, and then they use the same question papers, the same pattern, everything. Where is autonomy there? Autonomy is not that, no. Autonomy is starting from the decision relating to the objectives of teaching, to the course curriculum, to the course materials, to the assessment, and most other things. It's only the name of the certificate that changes in most autonomous colleges. So again, why I tell you that is that we have very limited control, even in the so-called autonomous colleges, which are not really functioning autonomously. The teacher control is very limited. So these three factors are fixed. They are thrust upon us, unfortunately. They are thrust upon us. I cannot escape them. I have to work within those limitations. But one factor that as a teacher I have control over, that I can manipulate to meet the various learning styles. So that is the fourth one, the teaching style and the methodology. This is absolutely my control. Again, here also there are some constraints, there are some regulations, some university norms, etc., some time constraints, etc. But still, I have a reasonably good freedom to manipulate things the way that I want. My style. Everybody has a style. No? Like students have a learning style, I have a teaching style. If my teaching style is good, if my teaching style is holistic, if my teaching is more Catholic in its outlook, automatically what happens? So more students are benefited and learning happens more effectively. So my teaching style and my methodology, the method that I use, there are various teaching methods. There might be some other class where you might have learned them, and if your students are B.Ed, M.Ed, or diplomas, etc., you already know this. So there are various methodologies, and the best methodology that suits a larger number of students, if I use that, my students learn better. So these are factors that affect learning. Okay, I know this. Now what do? The first step as a teacher. So as a teacher, the first thing that I need to do is I have to have a knowledge, a clear conception of these four things. What are my learners' preferences? So like I asked you that first question, maybe every teacher has to do some kind of a research to know what kind of students one has. Usually the answer is near normally the same. There are a variety of them. So any class, even if you go to an IIT and you have the brightest students there, and then all of them are again not the same. Even among that selected highly extraordinarily brilliant group of students, even there is a lot of variety. So I need to know my learners from their learner preferences point of view, the cognitive factors that affect them, the emotional factors, and the environmental factors. So what are these four things in terms of my classroom, in terms of my college or university, in terms of the subject that I teach, in terms of the kind and quality and background of the students that I have? If I begin doing some kind of, I mean, it need not be paperwork. If I do some kind of analysis of that, it helps me become better teachers, and it helps me handle the factors that I need to better. Coming quickly to the second part of my presentation, historically, what happened over the last 100, 150, 200 years in terms of studying this multiple intelligences, multiple learning styles concept. The first concept that we come across is the VAC model proposed by Walter Bergbaum. The letters VAK, already you might have noticed, are an acronym. VAK stands for visual, A stands for auditory, and K stands for kinesthetic. I'll not explain each of these terms in detail because I'm going to consider them a little later. So what Walter Berg did was, he was a psychologist. What he did was that he said there are three kinds of students. Some learn visually, some learn auditorily using their ears, and some learn kinesthetically with their hands. They feel, they touch, they do things and they learn. Right? So visual, auditory, kinesthetic. This was the first classification that we come across. Earlier, people thought that all students learned the same way. So when this research happened and when these findings were available to the classroom and also the psychologists and the educationists, they started realizing, oh, there are these three kinds of learners and something must be done. Okay. Then Neil Fleming added one letter to that. Instead of VAK, he made it VARK. He added the letter R and he said, no, it's not three, it is four kinds. Apart from the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic kinds of learners, learning styles, there is a fourth category of learners who are reading and writing time. So what he said is that, okay, people not only learn with their eyes, not only with their ears, not only with their hands and body and touch and all that, but some people learn only when they write and read. In fact, to share some of my personal experiences, of course, I went to school more than maybe 55, 60 years ago. That was the time when I think, to be more precise, my school days started 66 years ago, very long time ago. So when my school began, most of my education happened is reading, writing. Every teacher, irrespective of whatever they taught, of course, early levels, we had only one teacher, all classes, all students in one room. That was how my education started. But I went to what could be called a school from the modern point of view, when there were various classrooms and various levels taught by different teachers. That was much later when I went to the 5th or the 6th class. That system started for me. So most learning used to happen reading, writing. So the physics teacher, the maths teacher, the biology teacher, the social studies teacher, the maths teacher, everybody would ask us to read and write, make notes, learn things by heart, reproduce, and whatever was there on the board, we had to copy it down. This was most of our activity in the classroom, right? So reading and writing. But maybe when we had the previous model, reading and writing, learning style was either a part of the visual learning style or the kinesthetic learning style, and it was a part of that. So, I mean, there were three categories, no? That's why. So these were fitted into one of those categories. But a fourth category was added, fourth level, fourth kind of learning style. I'll very quickly play another short video. This is about 1.5 to 2 minutes, and it will help learners know what learning style they are within these 4 levels that we've seen, within these 4 kinds that we've seen.
All can become better learners. How? By understanding our learning style. How do you learn best? First, we need to understand what learning means. Learning is a process in which we acquire a skill or knowledge. In order to learn, our brains must absorb, process, comprehend, and retain information. Therefore, when it comes to the learning process, how do you learn best? How you learn best depends on your learning style. We all have strengths in the way we learn. Your learning strength will be your learning style. What are the different learning styles? The 4 that are the most popular and recognized learning styles are visual learner, auditory learner, reading and writing learner, and kinesthetic learner. First, let's take a look at a visual learner. A visual learner learns by seeing, learns more easily when information is presented in a visual manner, such as with pictures, video, charts, maps, and diagrams. Auditory learner. What is an auditory learner? An auditory learner learns best by listening and speaking. These type of learners tend to enjoy listening to music, stories, and prefer spoken directions over written directions. What is a reading and writing learner? These type of learners learn best through words. If you enjoy reading and or writing, you may be this type of learner. The last type of learner is a kinesthetic learner. This individual learns best when they can move. They can move their body, use their hands, or sense and touch. A kinesthetic learner learns by doing. How can you benefit from knowing your learning style? You can use those learning strategies and tools that support how you learn best. You can also study using your learning style. In the end,
Okay, so maybe let me just get out of here for a moment. Can anyone tell me what you've understood so far? These 4 learning styles, and then do you see any personal experiences you would like to share, or anything you would like to comment on that? Would you like to comment on this VAC model? Any personal experiences that you would like to share, or any comments on that? Agree, disagree, yes, no? What do you do in your class to meet these styles? Do you already cater to all these kinds of students in your class? I can't hear you. Are you all there, or have you disappeared?
I use certain documentaries, so like, and I feel that undergraduate students they are happy with the visual, kind of. So we cannot just always be with in that lecture mode. So I think a blend of this visual and lecture mode is I usually follow.
Thank you, Ekta. Ekta, what subject do you teach?
I teach political science.
Political science. So what kind of audios and videos do you use apart from your lectures?
Audios, I mean, in terms of the visuals, I use documentaries, some of the documentaries. So for example, if I have to teach about, let's say partition, Pakistan partition, then we watch documentaries like Garam Hawa, the movies and all. And then I also add it as one of the assessment or assignment. So, and I feel that it is, the students are much more receptive and responsive.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for saying that, Ekta. Anyone else has a similar experience using anything other than a lecture or maybe other than the standard, whatever your standard practice is, maybe deviating from your routine and then doing something different so that some of the students also show interest and learn better? Anyone else? Anyone who teaches a science subject?
Sir, good morning. I teach sociology. Though I'm posted in nagaRAJU College Girls Wing, I take, I'm a special guest lecturer in Jadavpur University, where I teach one module from their semester. So over there, they have got the system of CIAs where they have to an assessment, an internal assessment that they have to submit. So over there, instead of I have seen, and even, being a student of Jadavpur University myself, I have seen teachers giving us or professors giving us, articles and writing different kinds of, journal reviews. So instead of giving that, as Ekta ma'am said, even I try and do something different so that it becomes, sort of blended and not monotonous that way. So I give them, movie reviews or film reviews and documentary reviews so that, they have to see them, watch them, listen to them and, analyze them in their own way and thereby relating it to the theories that I've taught in the class.
Thank you, Smita. That was, I think I like that, the way you use the word blending, because blended learning is usually used in a different context, but I think that's the right word here. So we use, different forms of teaching and we meet different learning styles. One last person to talk something about, maybe have you ever used anything in your classroom to meet the needs of that kinesthetic learners? Students who learn by doing something, touching something, feeling something, by physically getting involved in that. A non-science student, any humanities or social studies teacher, please?
I teach mathematics, so it's very less time I use this kind of thing, but there is something called you can't trisect the angle using compass and ruler, but you can trisect it using origami. So I generally give them a piece of paper and ask them to trisect using some foldings. But other than that, I don't know.
That itself is a brilliant effort. But any social studies teacher meeting the needs of kinesthetic students in your class? Your personal experience?
I think some of the activities, the group work that that we do, like for example, students. I asked some of the students to to screen documentaries. Each group was supposed to screen a documentary. So I think that collaborative learning that was quite successful because the students, that peer learning kind of a thing. So that was kind of activity oriented.
Right. Thank you very much, Ekta, and everybody for saying those things. And of course, peer learning, group learning, collaborative learning are they slightly different. But if an individual has to be taught, how can we use this guide? If there is a student who is an individual, one student who learns kinesthetically, so what strategies do we use was my question. But anyway, I think you've got grasp of that idea. And there are different kinds of students in every class, and we need to do something as the teachers. I have to have a strategy. After I understand that there are different kinds of students, I need to have a strategy to meet their needs. That's all. If you have understood this basic principle, I think my job is done already. But let me go on from there. Okay. Yeah, we were here. Yeah, this is not exactly learning styles, but McCarthy came up with a different idea about the learning types, not styles, but learning types. So some said, he said that some students learn for a personal meaning. They want to find a meaning to their lives, to the purpose for which they are born, the purpose for which they are in the classroom or university, the purpose for which their education is meant. So the larger picture, the global picture, a personal meaning. So there is some bigger objective for some students. And there are some students who always, bank on facts, statistics, data, information. So, they are reflective, but knowledge is more important for them, right? Then there are students who always believe in finding solutions to problems. Very logical in their approach, straightforward, practical, using common sense. And they are very good with mathematics and all that. So finding solutions is the purpose for which they have come. And finally, there are students who synthesize the information. They are highly creative, highly adventurous, highly passionate, right? Very dynamic, and they combine things and they synthesize them, they analyze, and I think they do lots of experimentation, and that's why they are there. So taking into consideration the purpose for which our students have come to us, so there are these 4 types of students, and then again we have to keep this also in mind. It's not just the learning style, no, it's a purpose, because we need to meet the purposes, though we have a limited skeletal structure and our own objectives are what we work with. So sometimes the objectives of the students also have to be taken into account, and we need to know why students have come to learn with us. So what is their perspective, what is their objective, and what type of a learner one is, and based on that maybe we have to make appropriate changes to our teaching and class teaching process, right? Then there is a styles inventory. I'll not, because this is very similar to the previous one, I'll skip this. And this is something interesting. Okay, Felder Silverman, what he did is, he said that it's not 3 styles or 4 learning styles, but it is 5 different sets of styles. 5 sets, 5 into 2, 10 sets, contrasts, 5 contrasts. So students are either visual or verbal. He said some are visual, some are verbal. Some are inductive, some are deductive. Some start with the specifics and go to the generals. Some start with the generals and come back to the specifics. So students learn like that. That's what he said. And some students are sensing. Sensing type means the physical, sensory, learning from their senses, through their senses, practical in their approach. And some are intuitive. It just happens. Right? They don't need to feel things, but it just happens. Their mind works much more faster than their senses. Then there are another classification, whether they are very active or reflective. So some students are active in all matters. They try things out, they experiment, they get into groups easily, they collaborate, they work with others, etc. Some sit down quietly, think, and they analyze within their minds and hearts, and then they come out with solutions and answers. Then finally, there are some students who are sequential. Sequential means they learn things best when things are presented in a very systematic order, logical order. So facts can be presented in a chronological order, in a sequential, spatial order, in a logical order, right? So, one after the other, and then the secondly, thirdly, fourthly. Suppose the teacher uses that kind of language and then presents facts chained, connected to each other. Some students learn best. There are others who learn globally. It's holistic. It's not the order that's important. It's the totality, right? Learn in leaps and bounds, huge chunks of information. If you give them, they can do a great job. So this 10-point scale created by Felder Silverman classifies the students into 10 different categories, but on 2 vertical rows. So contrasts, 2 levels of contrast at each one of them. Finally, the last one, coming to the latest and the most classic classification of the learning multiple intelligences, which are associated with learning styles. Multiple intelligence is multiple learning style. So people learn based on their intelligence type. This is the idea. So Howard Gardner proposed 7 different multiple intelligences. The 8th one that you see here, naturalist, was added later. So he propounded this 7-point scale to categorize learning styles. So the first one is verbal, also called linguistic, which is mostly related to words and language. I'll go into each one of them in detail. That's why I'm just reading out the slide to you. The second one is logical, also called mathematical. And the third one is visual. Some people call it spatial. And the fourth one is a tactile. Tactile means touch, and also called kinesthetic or kinesthetic. The fifth one is musical, auditory. And the sixth one is interpersonal or social, right? They love working in groups and with others. And intrapersonal, alone, solitary, right? Like you answered that first question, and some of you said that you prefer to study on your own, solitary. And the last one is naturalist. So these are the 8 different intelligences. Howard Gardner again was a psychologist, and then he propounded this theory, but this theory that he suggested was so very attractive to the educational psychologists and academicians that they immediately jumped at it and they accepted it and they brought it to universities and colleges, and they started debating it and also considering its outcomes, and also started using it in all possible ways in colleges and universities, starting from defining the objectives to the assessing the outcomes. I think all of you are aware, before I move on to the next slide, all of you are aware that as a teacher, mostly we are confining ourselves to the classroom performance, the classroom teaching, and maybe a little preparation behind and a little assessment behind after that. But actually, that's not the entirety of teaching. No? So to actually, the process of teaching starts much earlier, when we start by defining the objectives for which a certain course is created, the objectives for which a university is established, the objectives with which a certain course is introduced at a certain level, etc. So starting from there. So the objectives, the designing of the curriculum, the prescription of the text material, and suggesting the teaching practices, methodologies, etc., and identifying the right teachers for that subject, and then going to the class and performing, teaching that, and assessing at various levels, internal, external, final, etc., whatever, all levels of, and also maybe reassessing the outcomes and maybe going back to the objectives and changing them. If not objectives, at least the course materials, the curriculum, making changes there to achieve. If the objectives still remain the same, so what modifications need to be made? So from feedback, the cycle begins again. So like this is a whole long process. So teachers, in case they get involved at every one of these levels, the experience will be much more satisfying anyway. So coming back to that 8 intelligences, multiple intelligences. So I am going to show you the next 8 slides, one dedicated to each one of them. And maybe we will see what these multiple intelligences are. And because we do not have, it's already almost 11 o'clock. So instead of describing them in great detail, what I'll tell you is, in case some of these students, if, first of all, you have some scientific way of knowing what intelligence is your student, and what if you have identified that. So in case that student approaches you either in a formal situation or in an informal situation, either inside the class or outside, either as a teacher or as a guide, if you want to support that student, maybe I'll give you some tips on what you can suggest from the career guidance point of view. Suppose you find a student who is verbally intelligent and you realize that. And once you realize that, what can you do with that to your class and to help that student? These are the 2 parts that I'll present on each one of these slides. So what you see here are the things that we can do, because I mean, the student learns verbally. So the teacher can use reading, writing, stories, word games. We can ask the students to read aloud. Of course, at a higher level, university and college, it may not be easily possible. except in some language classes, and to teachers using acronyms, keywords. It's all these. I think I don't need to read all that. Maybe you can go to these slides later also. But if such students, if a verbally able, intelligent student approaches you and asks for some career guidance, so this you can keep in mind. So you can advise them to become poets, journalists, writers, teachers, lawyers, politicians, and translators, because there is a great demand there and they can excel there. So instead of because they are doing a BA or a BCom course or an MA or MCom course, it does not strictly mean that they have to go in a certain channel and then accept a certain job opportunity that's available. So they can diversify at any level, they can move into other streams at any level, and their knowledge, of course, will come with them, and then it will be useful in a different way. But they will excel if they become any one of these professionals. So you can advise verbal students, verbally intelligent students, verbally capable, verbally intelligent, that kind of students. Right? Verbally means words, those who are good with words. Then there are a second category of intelligence, and that is logical. Some students are logically intelligent, and this is what you can do in the class. For instance, you can challenge them. So give them a challenge, give them a puzzle, give them a riddle, give them a difficult question, give them something that is not easy to answer, and then the student suddenly becomes alive. As long as the challenge level is very low, they don't become alert, and they think that it's routine. There's nothing much challenging in that. So you can present them statistics, facts, you can interpret abstract information, etc., etc., and you can advise them to take up these professions, these careers, so they can become great researchers. They will excel as accountants, as mathematicians, as computer programmers, and scientists. Suppose you are teaching a BCom class or an MCom class. Don't think, sir, my students are MCom students. How can they excel as computer programmers? So computer programming is not relating to computer program alone, but the program has some background knowledge. They need knowledge of commerce. They need knowledge of political science. They need knowledge of economics, because this same software that they are going to create is to be useful in many different ways or for many different fields. Hotel industry needs computer programming, for instance. Payment gateway needs computer programming. So they must have that knowledge, how this happens, how this deal happens. Right. Again, without going into too many details. So this you can keep in mind, and you can advise your students accordingly. And then there are visual students. What do visual students do? They learn with their eyes. So seeing is what they see is most important to them. So most learning happens with things that they can see. So what do we do in a class with visual students? If there are a good number of visual students in my class, or even if there are a few, so I make some effort. Like some of you already told me that you take a chart to the class, you show a picture, and maybe, for instance, when you see this screen here, so if I have used bold text, if I've used 2 colors instead of 1, maybe if I underline something, it will be more appealing to them. They will immediately like that. So visually, you must make whatever you present in the class appealing. I remember I became a lecturer long ago in 1975. How many years ago was that? Maybe very long ago. So when I became a lecturer, I taught English at college, and those days, all that we had access to was a blackboard and chalkpiece, nothing else. We did not have slide projectors, we did not have LCDs, we did not have LEDs, we did not have computers. Computer was not known at all. There was nothing called a computer there. So in those days, what I used to do is I used to carry color chalk pieces. The college did not provide them. College had only white chalk pieces, white crayons, and I bought them with my personal money. I used to go out, and actually they were not available in the town where I taught. It was a very small place. So whenever I came to Hyderabad, where I live now, so I used to go to a shop and then buy a box of color chalk pieces, color crayon, and I used to take it with me, and I used to keep it in my almirah. And whenever I went to the class, I used to take that. When I taught English language grammar, I used to underline the color that chalk piece, and then I used to highlight that. I used to make it bold. I used to write in a different color, and students really liked it. It was a very small experiment, but students loved it so much that, I mean, they looked forward to my class, most of them, especially the visual ones. I realized that, I mean, students like me, at least some students like me only for this purpose, only for this reason. So there is some small learning that happened to me at that point, that I had to make my classes visually appealing. And in case you find some visually intelligent students in your class, are, of course, there are bound to be some of them, quite a lot of them, and you can suggest them careers like navigating, sculpting, architecture, visual art, right, interior designing, etc., etc. These are only a few suggestive. There can be many others, right? Then there are tactile learners. What are these tactile learners? Tactile, those who prefer to do things with their hands, right? We call them kinesthetic earlier. So tactile, physically, with sensory perception, with their touch, they learn. So in case you have, you know that there are students who are intelligent tactile, in tactile terms. So you can offer them large spaces, and then you can give them hands-on experience, and you can create role plays in the class. I think somebody suggested this already. You have done that in your class. And you can ask them to teach each other personal experience handling it. So this kind of strategies will help in the class. And again, if they approach you to help them with regard to this course, with regard to the careers that you can advise them to choose, acting, then art, sports, athletics, crafts. So these are wonderful fields for them, and they can do really brilliantly well in these areas. Right. So going on to the next one, this is musically intelligent students, and I'm sure there are bound to be some students who are musically intelligent. I recall that very popular hit movie, The Sound of Music. So everything becomes fun, everything becomes learnable, everything becomes enjoyable, because all teaching is put in the form of music. So the moment a song is sung and whatever is recently, I think you also might have seen it, there was a video clip going around in WhatsApp. So a physics teacher singing his song, singing his lessons. You might have watched it. It's very interesting. So all physics lessons that he taught, he converted them into musically sweet lessons, and it became very popular. You can search for that and then watch that. That's really lovely. Okay, so musically intelligent. So I'll stop this. This is not necessary. Right. So what you can do, because books are available in audio form these days. Kindle is there, and then audio books are there, and many other formats are there. Even that readable books also have auto scrolling facility and many highlighting facility, etc. So you can suggest audio books to them, or you can ask your students to create their own audio books, or you can help in case you are good with the technology. You can read the book and you can convert that into an audio book, or you can supply your lessons in the audio format to some of them. Possible, no? So you were talking about blended learning and all that. That's where the future is. So future, I think if you continue just teaching, lecturing in the class and doing the same old way, I think we'll be very soon out of place. So that methodology is going to be obsolete. I mean, I don't mean to say that lecture is useless. Lecture has its own advantages, but lecture supported by some of these strategies is much more effective. That's what I'd like to tell you. So we can suggest audiobooks to these students, and we can have movies, songs, which teach the same ideas that we want to teach them. Then there are students who love to have music in the background when they read or when they prepare for exams. So, I mean, there are people who support that. There are also people who say that that's not a good idea, whatever that be. But in case a student thinks that he learns best when there is some music behind, you can allow them to try that. You can record your own voice, and future, again coming back to that blended learning concept somebody talked about. So there's a different kind of a blended learning that's going to happen when learning is going to happen both synchronously and asynchronously. As you are teaching in your class, all students are with you, they are all seated there, and then they're all learning together with you. But if you give the same lesson, for instance, if you allow your students to bring their mobile phones to the class and use them for recording your lessons, right? So MIT threw its doors open long ago to all their classes. I think for more than a decade now already, all their classes are globally live cast. Like that, maybe if you allow your students to record your lesson, they can go back and then listen to that a second time, third time, or maybe they can listen to that lesson at whatever intervals they want, at their own pace, at their own place. And in addition to what you teach in the, suppose you don't want that to happen, classrooms do not allow mobile phones, or classrooms are not conducive to use technology or whatever, for whatever reason, you can teach something in your class, and you can also audio record another part of the class. It can be, for instance, an assignment, and this assignment you post to them after the class is over, so the student listens to that and answers that and sends either audio answers or text answers, whatever you suggest. So in language classes, some loud reading can happen, rhythm, music, sound, etc. All these help these students learn best. So in case some of these students come to you requesting you to suggest a proper career for them, you can ask them to become musicians, disc jockeys, singers, composers, music critics. Again, don't think that their MA is wasted. It's not going to go waste. So that career and education need not be hand in hand. They just help each other, that's all. Okay, right. Then there are social learners. Social is together, learning together, learning in companionship, and interpersonal skills are very essential for these kinds of students. So what do you do? Like one of the participants has just said, you can have lots of collaborative learning opportunities for your students, group learning, for instance, pair learning, right? Project work, right? Right, a whole class response. For instance, when I asked you a few questions earlier, so everyone in the class was given an equal opportunity. I did not identify the students and say, okay, Ekta, please give answer to this question. So the others stop thinking. The moment I gave the name of a student, the others think, oh, it's her job, not my job. So when it's open, everybody is still thinking, oh, can I contribute something next? So will I get a turn next? So if I get a turn, so what do I say? So things like that. So promote collaborative learning and allow discussion, encourage debate, discussion on a concept. Use some of your classes to brainstorm. So lots of ideas. I think you know brainstorming technique that can be very productively used by teachers of any subject. Don't think it's only for language classes, only for political science or social studies or whatever. So it can be used in all subjects. Before you begin the class, for instance, the first 4 or 5 minutes, you can do a brainstorm session, and then you can write to the board everything that the students contribute. And gradually after the brainstorm is over, maybe you can address the problem or discuss the topic. That is a whole, an excellent classroom strategy, right? So you can share stories, you can again discuss them, you can allow a lot of group work, role play, etc. So socially intelligent students learn best when their ideas are presented this way. Then they become good researchers, good theorists, good philosophers, good politicians, excellent salespersons, wonderful teachers, right? And social workers. So teachers typically are social learners, and otherwise if they are solitary, if they prefer to learn alone, I don't think they will be really very successful as teachers. There may be a few exceptions, right? And the solitary ones, those who learn to, those who prefer to learn on their own. Their preferred style is alone, being lonely, right? So we ask such students to relate their experiences to the class. For instance, when I asked you this question today about the video, I said, okay, don't tell me your earlier experiences, but how do you relate to this? So the idea that has been suggested in this video, how does it reflect on your work? So you have to connect it, your own personal experience, not somebody else's, not the general, not what you read in the book. Okay. So help them think and feel is very important. So these kind of students need a lot of time, a lot of attention to themselves. So they need time to think. It's not jumping to answers, but it is reflection. So unless you give that, for instance, again, what I did is today, when I showed that video, many people, what they do is they show, I think it's a tip for you, it's a teaching tip for you. Whenever you take a video clip or any visual material to the class, don't just show it. Give them a task first. So, okay, I'm going to play a video to you. I'm going to give this video to you. Or I'm going to play this audio track to you. Or I'm going to read out something in the class. But while you are reading, you have to do this for me. You have to answer these questions, which I'm going to ask you afterwards. So first give the task, then play the audio, video, whatever. Then come back to the task that you gave and discuss that. I think that strategy works really well. All kinds of students, not only solitary. But what do most teachers do? They just go, okay, I'm going to play a video, watch it. Okay, they watch it. After that, they ask a question. The student was not focusing on that. The student was focusing on something else. So in case you give the task first and play the video, automatically the focus is on that. Okay, I need to answer question number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I need to look for this. And that's why I will be attentive to that. So my purpose is served. Right. So that is another teaching tip. So individual problem solving. So such students do not like to get into projects with others. They don't like, group participation. They don't, even if they do it also, they do better when they work alone. They are not benefited by working in a group. Okay. Then explain the outcome. Okay, if you learn this is the advantage. Once they understand that, they work on their own. Okay, so these are some things that you can do in your class, and such students can be advised to become counselors, philosophers, critics, writers, statesmen, etc. So if you have the additional responsibility of being a career coach in your college, or even if you do not have that responsibility as a teacher, it's our responsibility to help our students become what they really like or what they can excel in, and maybe we have to identify their strengths, their intelligences, and we have to advise them appropriately. Finally, the last one is the naturalist. I told you that the 8th one was added later. There were actually 7 earlier. The 8th one, the naturalist. So they prefer to get the global picture, the big picture. The universal level, the world level, the earth level picture, perspectives to understand better. And they find patterns. So they go from specifics to generals. So they identify patterns. Okay, suppose they are taken out into a garden. So they can see those patterns that a biology teacher can benefit great by asking them to identify the various kinds of leaves, various kinds of flowers, various kinds of plants, and then arrive at some patterns there. Similarly, they can relate things to their own lives, their own daily life, nature around, and they are extremely good with classification, right? So these are, they will benefit from experimenting. So instead of just teaching them, give them a task where they have to experiment something and then they have to get the findings to the class. And see, such people become excellent photographers, natural scientists, adventurers, explorers, etc. And you can advise them accordingly. In case you find students who have this kind of intelligence, naturalists, you can advise them to be this. Okay, I have a task for you. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pictures you see on the screen. And I've also given 8 different learning intelligence types and intelligence learning styles on the right side. Maybe you can match them and tell me which one is which. Don't think that all 8 pictures relate to all 8 learning styles. I'm not giving you any clue on that. So you may find an example for each one. You may not find an example for each one, and your interpretation may be different from somebody else's. Okay, one after other. The first one, who is this?
Gautam Buddha.
Lord
And
Buddha.
what kind of intelligence do you relate him to?
Logical.
Was he a logical thinker? Anybody else?
So, intrapersonal.
Natural.
Intrapersonal, sure. Are you all,
Intrapersonal.
Intrapersonal.
intrapersonal? What does intrapersonal mean?
Introspective.
Yeah.
Who introspects.
Yeah, was person who introspects, thinks, reflects, right? Is usually solitary, right? And maybe more reflection is intrapersonal. I don't think he was logical at all. So logic does not work in spiritual matters. Or maybe, I don't want to go into that controversy, but I think Gautam Buddha perhaps was the most intrapersonal among these guys. Okay, who is this one, the second one?
Vishwanathan.
Oh, good. So you recognize it. Vishwanathan Anand. What kind of a intelligence was his?
Logical.
Logical. Logical is maths, logic, sequencing, and ordering, and all that. And then I think thinking 5 steps ahead. That's logic, So I think, yes, you are all right. And this one? Who is this?
Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, lovely. Oprah Winfrey. And what is her intelligence?
Interpersonal.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think you're all brilliant. Interpersonal. So she talks a lot. She interacts with people. She always is found with a group of people. And she involves so many. Whenever she conducts a program, so hundreds of people attend, and then she involves so many people in that. And then she loves being among people. Right? I think I think the greatest punishment that you can give her is asking her to be alone. Impossible. If you ask her to stop talking to people and be silent, I think she'll die. So absolutely, perhaps it's very difficult to find people equal to her in her interpersonal skills, right? So interpersonally intelligent. And who is this man? I think everybody knows him. Shashi Tharoor. What was his intelligence? Very good.
Verbal.
I think you are excellent. All of you are really brilliant. So
It can be interpersonal also because he is a politician and he interacts with the people.
Right, you're right. You're right. So I'll come to the next slide to explain what you said. In the next 2-3 slides, I'll discuss that. For the time being, so we will treat him as a verbally intelligent person. So, his felicity, his comfort with words, I think words just come like that. Whether he's writing or speaking or whatever, so he has thousands of words that are not even known to the rest of the world. He's a kind of a maverick, miracle maker with words. He plays with words. Right. Okay. And this man, I think are there any students in zoology?
Bird watcher.
But what's his name? Yeah, you are right. You are right.
Ali.
Correct. Ali is a bird watcher.
Yes,
Naturalist.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. I think he spent nearly 75, 80, 90% of his adult life outside home. He went deep into the forest. He used to carry a camera, a small team of people, and he made such beautiful pictures. He won lots of awards for that. Ali is famous all over the world, not only in India. So one of the most well-known naturalist, right? And this gentleman, every young person, I think, is musical intelligence. And this one, MF again, yes. And what kind of intelligence is this? A little difficult to guess. Spatial. So art typically happens in space. So you may call him an artist, but art is, giving a shade to space. So I'm also, MF not just painted the routine kind of things, big spaces, huge walls. I think every one of his murals was sometimes furlongs long. So that kind of huge things he created, and he's a spatial artist, spatial intelligence was his forte. So MF Hussain. And the last one?
Charlie
Charlie
Chaplin.
Chaplin body.
Bodily.
Body.
Right. Every part of every millimeter of his body speaks, right? So unless he does that, no, he cannot just, be quiet. So, on the screen at least, I don't know how he was outside, off the screen, but on screen, he spoke with his body. He did not need dialogue. He did not need anything else. His body spoke. So these are the various kinds of intelligences. Of course, these are very popular examples. It was very easy. You did not go wrong anywhere. All of you got it right and you guessed it right. So these are intelligences that are very, very clearly seen, except in the case of Shashi Tharoor. I think you did not have any confusion at all. Only there somebody said interpersonal and somebody said verbal, etc. But otherwise, all of you were very easy. Found it very easy to identify them. Now coming to a problem. This is I don't have time for this. What you can do is there are some questions like this by answering which you will personally know for yourself what kind of a learning style is yours. Don't worry about that. In case you want to do it at home later, so there are some questionnaires free of cost available on various platforms like Google. You can go to Psychology Today, for instance, places like this, where you can answer a questionnaire to find out what kind of intelligence in what portion do you have, your learning style, right? Okay. Then in case you want, you can take a screenshot of this. Maybe you can try it later. MI stands for multiple intelligences, right? Oh, this is the last part of my presentation. Let me tell you that there is a lot of criticism about these learning styles, theories that are, of course, quite popular and that are used by some universities while building their materials, while designing their curriculums, etc. We must remember that nobody, not like in this picture, I told you again, not like in this picture, you cannot identify one student with one completely predominant learning style. Everybody is some combination. If you remember the first slide that I showed you, I just gave you 3 questions and there were at least 7, 8 different, 9 different combinations possible, I think. 9, I think, 3 into 3 into 3. So 9 combinations were there within that 3 question pattern. So if nobody is only one kind, everybody is a combination of different kinds. So for instance, if I am a visual learner, partially I'm a logical learner also, partially I'm a spatial learner also, a little this, a little more this, a little less this. So I learn all possible ways, but maybe predominantly I learn a certain way. So that's what exactly we mean. Don't brand somebody as only this, right? So, and the science is not strong enough. We cannot make very serious assumptions based on this theory of multiple intelligences and multiple learning styles. And this is what you need to take home today. So teaching one style doesn't work. Suppose I go to class and all my 60 minutes is a lecture. I think it's going to be a disaster for the students, not for me. It's a disaster for at least more than half my students. Perhaps it doesn't go. It doesn't hit them. So I have to have a combination of strategies, a combination of methodologies, a combination of approaches, so that, see, the whole idea is to help students learn better, grasp better, comprehend better, analyze better, synthesize better, recall better. That's the idea, no? So if the learning process includes all these things, my teaching must promote that, each one of them. And if that has to happen, I must have a combination of methodologies. Every class, for instance, if I have a 50-minute class, within that 50 minutes, there must be at least something to meet the needs of the logical learners. There must be at least a little to help the musical learners. There must be at least a little for verbal learners, right? If there is a combination of all these, every student is active in my class and every student learns. So one Size does not fit everybody. That's the lesson that you must carry with you. Though you have learned all these things, still the conclusion is that one style doesn't work. Learning styles also change with age, change with the circumstances, change with the subject that you are teaching, change with the subject that the students are learning, the classroom pattern, the teaching methodology, etc. Right? I learn physics a different way, and my music lesson a different way. I learn when I sit in a classroom with fixed chairs a different way. I learn a different way when I sit in a classroom where I have a lot of physical space and the movable chairs and furniture is attractive, impressive, comfortable, etc. So it also changes from time to time, from person to person, from occasion to occasion, from environment to environment. So they are not fixed. So in a certain situation, I am this kind of learner, but in a different kind of a situation, I'm a different kind of learner. So this is what you must keep in mind. So finally, conclusion, what do? So we have to have inclusive concept. Every student is my student. Every student has come here to learn with a different approach, with a different background, etc. I must appreciate those differences. And I must offer a variety of resources to them. So there must be a video, there must be an audio, there must be a question, there must be a riddle, there must be some music. If all these things are there in all, don't think these are only for language class again. These are for every class. And finally, if I use all these multiple strategies, my lessons become much more interesting. I don't think I have time for another video. And you might have seen this. I'll just show it to you and stop here. Which film is this from? Most of you might have seen this, how the dyslexia problem is discussed here and how they finally arrive at solution. So there is a problem with one individual, unique student, and the problem is successfully handled because the strategy is formed. So that's where I stop. It's 11:30 now. I'm sorry, we don't have much time for I'm stopping presenting this. Much time for question answer, but still, in case you have any questions, maybe we can use the next 4 or 5 minutes to discuss them, and we'll stop there. So thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Though I told you in the beginning that you could stop me, perhaps nobody has done that. Anyway, I think you've got an idea of what these multiple intelligences are and how as teachers we can benefit by knowing them and by having a strategy to manage them appropriately. Any questions?
In between, you said about their intelligence and suggest them to choose their according to their interest career. But for instance, some of us are teaching students who are already kind of in MSc or PhD. So at that time, how to handle such a kind of situation?
I mean, if you just look at real life outside, there are doctors who have become musicians, actors. There are MBA postgraduates who are working in software management. So, I mean, the profession and the field of study many times do not go together. If you look at real life, that's what has happened. Except those who become teachers, maybe what they have studied at the university and what they are doing now are not directly relevant. Except in teaching, what are the professions, what you learned is really useful. Or even if it's useful, to what level? For instance, if you do engineering and you become an engineer, so what you study perhaps may not be directly relevant to what you're going to do tomorrow. So, so these are two different things. We'll not go into a very big detailed debate on that, but maybe if you are working at the graduate level, leave alone PhD students. So if you are working at the graduate level and if students access you and they trust you, and you also love to help them by giving them right guidance, and if they have passion there, so people can easily succeed when they take up a profession which they are passionate about. I think this a global truth. So I excel in a field in which I am really deeply interested. It's very difficult for me to build in a field. Suppose I am not a teacher by passion, and I become a teacher. I mean, I don't think I can survive here for a very long time. And even if for my salary or for some other reason, if I survive here, I don't think I'll ever become a great teacher.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Because there are no other questions, maybe one or two things that I can add before we leave this 11:33 answering the same question is that if you look at the most famous people in the world around cricketers, scientists, and politicians and managers, leaders, all these fields, I think their background is completely different. Doctors became cricketers, for example. Some of the very popularly known film artists were medical students, were engineering students. Fashion artists came from science subjects. So, I mean, I'm talking about the best, not the mediocre ones.
Yeah, that is true. Like, for instance, Witten, he won a Fields Medal, but he was history student. I mean, he won for mathematics.
So, if there are no other questions, we'll call it a day. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. Thank you for being here. And you can continue interacting with me in case you have any questions. I'll show you my... one second. This is my email ID, lionnagaraju@gmail.com, LIONNAGARAJU@gmail.com. In case you have any questions or comments or any useful feedback, please feel free to give me. lionnagaraju@gmail.com. Thank you once again. Is there somebody from the university?
Thank you, sir. I think Nassima sir is not.